For years, Saudi Arabia has been preparing itself for the biggest IPO ever on the stock market. When the largest company in the world finally did go public on September 2014, the oil giant was evaluated at a whopping $2 trillion. Who knew a country that was filled with miles of dunes would hit the largest IPO listing in history? As many reserves as the land has today, at one point they had to drill 7 wells in a span of 3 years just to discover something valuable. In today's episode, we will discuss Aramco. Aramco does not only shake oil market, but it essentially runs a country. Their decision has a huge impact on the planet. So for Aramco to go public is a huge deal. But how exactly did they start and went public? The search for oil in Saudi Arabia began in the 1920s, when Ibn Saud, the first monarch and the founder of Saudi Arabia, awarded a concession to Holmes, a British New Zealander mining engineer, to explore the country for oil in the eastern region. Holmes was to pay an annual fee of £2,500. But after years of work, Holmes couldn't find any sign of oil, so he went to Bahrain. Later in 1932, a former SoCal's representative on foreign relations, Francis Loomis, wrote a letter to Philby, a friend of Ibn Saud, to seek his help in obtaining an oil concession in Saudi Arabia. Philby, being a friend of the king's, looked for ways to find a better deal. So he contacted the Anglo-Persian to send a negotiator for an oil bid. Their negotiator was only authorized to pay £6,000 for the concession. The Americans were willing to pay more and agreed that they would pay £35,000 in gold up front, a second loan of £20,000 after 18 months, and a rental fee of £5,000 a year. And so on February 20, 1933, a team started their journey on a ship from America to Jeddah. This team would soon change the future of oil industry. When they arrived, they signed a concession with the Saudi finance minister Abdullah al-Sulaiman al-Hamdan. After months of mapping and locating areas using airplanes and other means of transportation, the team took their first step of bringing Standard Oil Company of California into the Middle East by drilling their first well in a location known as Dammam. The drilling for the first well started on April 30, 1935. The first hole was drilled using a Chinese technique known as the cable tool method. 3 workers work around the clock drilling day and night. But by December, there was no sign of oil. The drilling was stopped at a depth of 976 meters. The team decided to drill another site, Dammam 2. Work started on February 1936. Initially, location 2 was showing signs by producing 3,840 barrels a day. But later in the year, the oil discovered was no more than 225 liters a year. Location 3 started in mid-July but couldn't produce more than 100 barrels a day. Number 4 and 5 were dug 700 and 630 meters deep with no promising results. Number 6 was lagging behind because of the rush of work. Then, on December 7, 1936, they drilled the deepest hole. Sadly, after 2 weeks of drilling, Dammam number 7 blew out, and a jet of gas sent the rig high in the air. The team continued and pushed on, digging a hole that was 3,300 feet below the ground. On March 4, 1938, nearly 3 years after Dammam number 1, 1,585 barrels of oil started to come out from number 7. In 3 days, the flow went to an astonishing rate of 3,690 barrels a day. The oil kept coming out. A plan was made to transport oil from fields to the port of Ras Tanura to send oil out to other countries. A 63-kilometer pipeline was laid out that took about a year, and on May 1, 1939, King Abdulaziz ibn Saud visited the port to turn a valve. The oil from Saudi was about to flow in the world. Knowing that there could possibly be a lot more oil, in May the Americans signed an agreement with the king, extending the concession to 1.14 million square kilometers. The king, in return, asked for £140,000 in gold, a rental fee of £25,000 a year, and a promise of £100,000 if new oil fields were discovered. By the end of 1939, Saudi's oil export amounted to a whopping 521,000 tons. But then the world was at war. Oil was as precious as ever. Without oil, the war cannot be won. Nations were using oil to lay down their runways. Oil was used in trucks, tanks, and airplanes. The army started targeting refineries, fuel factories, storage depots, in order to ensure that the other side either ran out of oil or had to give up. The production of oil in Saudi halted to avoid German occupation of the oil fields. Seeing that the production was halted and knowing that the land is filled with oil, ExxonMobil started making a deal with Saudi Arabian oil company that was now known as Aramco, the Arabian American Oil Company. In 1948, ExxonMobil bought interests in Aramco. In order to secure fair and stable prices for petroleum, OPEC was founded in 1960. 5 countries became the founder members of the organization: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Saudi Arabia and several other oil-producing countries began nationalizing their natural resources, and by 1980 the Saudi government had completely bought out Aramco's assets, changing Aramco to Saudi Aramco. Fast forward, in 2004, Aramco was producing 8.6 million barrels per day. The following year, they increased their capacity to 12.5. The same year, they became the world's largest company with an estimated market value of $781 billion. In 2008, Aramco announced it would increase production to 9.7. In 2011, Saudi Aramco was drilling more than 71 million barrels per day. 7 years later, the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, announced the plan to offer 5% of Aramco at the stock exchange. The plan was announced with a goal of welcoming investments from outside and with a vision to take Saudi away from oil dependency by introducing the country to other economic sectors. The plan to take a portion of the company public kept getting delayed. In September 2019, there was a drone attack on 2 Saudi Aramco plants. The attack cut Saudi Aramco capability by 5.7 million barrels per day, over 5% of the world's supply. But the company finally did go public, offering 1.5% of the company's value to the stock. And on 11 December 2019, Saudi Aramco's initial public offering on the Tadawul Stock Exchange saw a rise of 35.2 riyals, giving it a market capitalization of about $1.88 trillion, and surpassed the $2 trillion mark on the second day of the Tadawul Stock Exchange, making it the largest IPO in history. What the future holds for Aramco is yet to be seen, with a company controlling 17% of the world's oil reserves, with the cheapest lifting cost of about $4, with operational wells from 1936, and 98% of the company owned by the government of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Aramco's future seems bright. Until next time, have a good one.